Hello, hello, all those beautiful faces. How are we doing on this Saturday night? Back for another live show. I'm Stephanie Edmonds, your host and creator of Teaching Liberty. And tonight I have with me Regina Moussati, Your Health, Your Wellness, LLC. Also, former New York City teacher, still out here right by my side, holding the line. What's going on, Regina?
Nothing much. Just hanging out on this lovely Saturday, enjoying the cold.
Oh, okay. Enjoying the cold. That's one way to put it. It's definitely been brisk out there the last couple of days, but I think we actually had the warmest January on record. I don't know. That could be a conspiracy theory. It could be
It's not.
misinformation. It could be
I checked
disinformation. It could be a Chinese psyop. Who knows?
it too.
Which is the big story that you wanted to talk about today, right? The Chinese spy balloon. So I'm definitely excited for your takes on that. I'm like not really so sure what to think, to be honest. And then we're gonna get into some medical misinformation. I don't know how much you've heard about that AB 2098 out in California,
Yep, heard about it.
right? That one that's muzzling doctors. And then I think we're going to kind of pretty clearly demonstrate exactly why that bill should not be in place by giving you a little update on what the experts are saying. And the article I got is actually from Germany. So I'm pretty excited to bring that in to get some of that international perspective. But before we get into any of that, I want to know a little bit about the perspective you bring to the table. Like what we always like to put our biases out there so we get everything out on the clear. You know, people kind of know my bias, but I tell people, what's your political perspective? What kind of experiences are you bringing to the table?
So after, like everyone else, like it's been the hot story with this whole Chinese spy balloon. The red flag goes up for me. Like whenever something hits the mainstream and it's all over the place and it's catching fire, I'm kind of like, all right, so if this is what's out there, what's the stuff they're not sharing? Or like perhaps it could be some sort of distraction from something else. It's like dangling the sparkly like toy
Are
in
you
front
saying you're a conspiracy theorist?
of
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Okay, so you like to question the narrative, is what
Yeah,
you're saying.
yeah.
Do
Some
you
people feel
identify with any of the political parties one way or the other? Do
I
you
don't. I don't
have
think
a
I do. I like to look at myself as a conspiracy analyst because there's so many out there and so many that have come across to be true. And I think the last 3 years have proved that when somebody has that label, it's more of a person you should befriend than someone you should deem crazy with the tinfoil hat. But I'll keep my tinfoil hat. It hasn't led me astray in the wrong direction yet. So
but do
uh,
you vote or are you like
I
a
do vote. I
non-voter?
do vote. I vote, not necessarily party lines. I'm not a big fan of the political parties. I think it's two sides of the same coin. I'm registered currently independent, and I just think it's up to the person and what they bring to the table because no party is really going to be there to save you. No one is there to save you. You have to figure out your own means to save yourself. And I do think a lot of the things that happen are political theater.
Did you grow up in a household where there was like one party or the other, or your
Yeah.
parents were kind of the same way?
Yeah, my parents, they were predominantly voting on the Republican ticket.
Okay, interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
so you were out there in like the outer borough Queens, right?
Well, later on in life, I moved to Queens, but I grew up in Brooklyn. So it
Okay,
was
okay.
very diverse. The neighborhood, like, it was a diverse neighborhood. There was Democrats, there were Republicans. And I have family members who are straight up Democrats, and I have family members that are straight up Republicans. And then I have them who, like me, are just independent minded and realize that they're two sides of the same coin.
Okay. All right. So bringing those independent thoughts, and of course, like we said, we're both teachers, or
Mhm.
yeah, we're still teachers. I get
Absolutely,
confused.
forever.
You actually still technically do work in a school, but
Mhm.
it's a new school because, like me, a little over a year ago, you were fired for refusing to submit to the COVID vaccination mandates.
It didn't align with my religious beliefs, and it would have been a pure violation of my body, which is given by God. And it just wasn't something that I could have done. And I know God always has my back and leads me in the right direction. So I no worries about that.
And you made it through the winter of death, right? What
I
was that?
survived the winter of death. As crazy as that may be, happy to be one of them to say that here I am. I didn't die, thank God. I think that was absolutely crazy. Did you watch that video recently of like all the clips of everyone saying how we were all going to die if we weren't vaccinated?
I celebrated the anniversary. It was like December of somewhere in December of last year, mid-December, and I was like, this was the day when our great president declared, but we have more news that deals with our great president here. This is, I would say, kind of a national emergency of sorts.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, it's gotten a lot of attention. All the news outlets are covering it, which again is red flag. But
so let's check it out. I found some great coverage here, you could say, by CNN.
Oh, the best.
They've got this page that's keeping us up to date, 34 new posts on this situation. So I thought we would start right here because this is sort of the beginning. This was 20 hours ago. And Biden was first briefed Tuesday. I'm sorry, this was updated 20 hours ago, but he was told on Tuesday that there was a suspected Chinese surveillance balloon. Right. Joe Biden was first briefed on Tuesday that the suspected Chinese surveillance balloon is hovering over the U.S. The president has since continued to receive regular briefings and updates from the national security team. John Pierre described the decision-making process, saying that after he was briefed, Biden asked the military to present options, and it was strong recommendation by the Secretary Austin, Chairman Milley, the commander of Northern Command, not to take kinetic action because of the safety risks and security to the people on the ground. Meaning, if they shot it down, they'd be worried about the debris, where it landed, all these types of things. Because obviously the American military is not sophisticated enough to do like some sort of controlled landing. So that nobody got hurt, and also to figure out what the hell this thing is. That's too crazy for the American military. So we're just waiting and watching. Is there anything else you want to add to the situation here?
I'm a little concerned that if you were briefed on this on Tuesday and today is Saturday and it was shot down today, like that was what was reported. Initially when I was like, okay, so they're not shooting it out of the sky. Why wouldn't they shoot something out of the sky or, throw it off course? Because we are the greatest military in the world. We have the greatest budget and we outspend every single country across the globe. So why wouldn't we? I'm sure we have the technology to detect what is actually on that. So I feel like there was a reason, like, were they worried that there was something on that balloon that could really harm someone? Because they could have definitely thrown it off course. There's no reason why they could not have done that. But the reason a lot of red flags.
Maybe it was the responsible thing to do to watch and wait. I mean, they did ultimately within the last few hours, like this just happened. This is a brand new update that they shot it down. So maybe it was the right thing to watch and wait.
Maybe. I mean, I thought there was definitely a reason why they weren't. I was trying to give the president the benefit of the doubt, being like, okay, maybe there's some dangerous material on there. Or, and then you read these articles. I think the Washington Examiner was like, oh, this is just test runs for the EMP attack that they want to, that somebody's going to do. Or it's actually not a Chinese spy balloon. It's in fact the United States government. And that's why, they're just seeing the reaction of the people. But who really knows what's going down? There's all these alternative stories, right? And it's just a matter of figuring out or putting together the pieces of what really is going down. Although there were some interesting videos last night that were on top of Montana of like debris falling out of the sky. And I know it wasn't over there yesterday. We know that it was shot down today. But there were some interesting things happening in the sky.
Maybe related, maybe unrelated. Just people were looking at the sky probably a little bit more than normal. So then you start like noticing things a little bit more than normal. So maybe it was related, maybe it wasn't. Let's go ahead and check out a little bit more. So this is a picture of apparently what it looked like from the sky. I don't know. I guess if you have binoculars, maybe it looks more interesting. I don't know what I would think about it.
I mean, it was 60,000 feet, I believe they said. It was well above any plane plane that would have ever gone up that high.
Right. So it says now the Chinese balloon has been brought down in a puff of smoke and debris by a U.S. air launched missile after
Mhm.
perplexing Washington with its 3-day odyssey over the continental United States. The question is, what was it all for? So it was hanging out for 3 days before they
Yep,
made this decision. Again, I'm open to arguments that it was the responsible decision to like wait and see before shooting it down,
I could agree with that.
rather than doing it right away. I
Mhm.
don't know, but I think that I do think it was a little bit long. I think that they probably could have figured it out and taken action a little bit more swiftly than they did. But
I
it says once the balloon was spotted, Beijing claimed it was a weather observation airship that had been blown off course, drawing a snort of derision from the Pentagon. So being like, okay, like I guess it
whoops.
which said the balloon was able to maneuver and had made some deliberate turns, bringing it at one point over Montana, home of the U.S. arsenal of silo-based nuclear intercontinental ballistic missiles.
What a coincidence.
Yeah, yeah, right. So they're like, "Oh, it got blown off course," and then the Pentagon's like, "No, we saw it move around.
Yeah.
You were by some interesting places."
Hmm.
If it was indeed a spy balloon, the whole episode raised a lot of questions about decision making in Beijing. It was quite predictable that the balloon would be spotted, tracked, and potentially shot down, and this would all happen in the run up to Secretary of State Anthony Blinken's visit to Beijing. So, a little bit more context here. I mean, there is a lot of stuff going on. China and the US aren't necessarily friends. There's been a lot of tension ratcheting up in the
Yep.
Middle East.
Hmm. Yeah, there's been a lot of drama there, but it's what's being put in front of us, and we're kind of like, I don't know. We think that the relations with our administration are a little too close for comfort. We know that there are people in Congress that have connections and have had relationships with people that are affiliated with the not so great groups on the other side. We also know that these spy balloons go back to World War II, and that at this point in time, they've gotten incredibly more sophisticated. And it wasn't just over the United States. It was, they said, Latin America. They've been spotted in, around the world recently. So it's almost like, why? What's the point? What are we trying to do here? And it could cross your mind, or it's not the craziest thought to think that maybe it's just, let's see how people react to this, and then they, whatever plan they want to do for next time, or whatever the case may be. I do think
Right.
it was up there a little too long, but again, my reasoning in my head was, okay, maybe there's something really dangerous on there. Maybe there's some sort of nuke or some sort of.
Right. I mean, you have to always consider the possibility that it is what they say it is, right? That there is something going on.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree.
I don't know how often that's been the case ever, though. More and more that I'm seeing things,
Hmm.
never what's reported in the media is actually what it is. It's always some noble lie so that
Hmm.
the public doesn't overreact and panic.
Right.
I also have been talking a lot lately about how I think that social media is used to test pilot certain
Yeah.
ideas. And I don't think that's too crazy to think either. We know, for example, if a politician is thinking about running for office,
Hmm.
they'll often put a headline out or leak something out and see how the public reacts, engage, the appetite for those types of things.
Hmm. Yeah, it's totally true. They always are running. I always think there's always, I don't want to say an experiment, but there's always something being run to test people. I don't know if you want to say it's like a psychological thing, or these tests that they run, and they've been knowing to run for hundreds of years. A lot of things have come out from classified documents, not the ones that are hiding in somebody's garage. Although they
Right.
could be in there. I don't really know what's in there.
Well,
So,
the thing is that they don't hide it, a lot of these things. I've been watching this channel, Alison McDowell, and she does a lot of the research where she'll go back and read books that are 75 years old, 50
mhm.
years old, 100 years old, and people of legitimate you know, institutions and professions and seemingly revered are talking about really crazy things that are
Yeah.
super esoteric and about crystals and energy
That's so
and
funny. I saw something about that today with crystals, of these crystal cities, that there was this pilot, or this explorer rather, and he had gone to the South Pole and he had written this diary of his experiences in the South Pole. And after he passed, his son had discovered them. And when he read the diary, he read the most, I mean, it sounds crazy in today's present day and age, but that some wild things went on in the South Pole that nobody would really expect. It was I think it was either the South Pole or one of those places, and it was pretty crazy, like crystal cities, and people had these crazy technologies. And I don't know, I'm not saying I don't believe in every single thing. I just, you have to be open, and you can't be naive to the thought of there are things that we don't know and that have been hidden from us for all these years.
right. And sometimes think people just forget the news cycle is a lot. There's a lot of things going on. But when I was doing some research for this, I actually found an interesting story from 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And so in 2019, Pentagon launching drug surveillance balloons over the Midwest, right? So an unmanned surveillance balloons are being launched from South Dakota to conduct surveillance over the Midwest, prompting concerns about privacy violations. The Pentagon is testing the altitude solar powered balloons across 6 states. The balloons were launched to provide persistent surveillance system for narcotic trafficking and homeland security threats. The FCC authorized Sierra Nevada Corp, a Nevada-based national security and aerospace contractor.
Mm-hmm.
So again, well, whose balloon was this? Who's doing the balloon launching? I mean, I guess technically China did take credit for it, they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
But, we seem to do our own balloons as well.
Right. We do a lot of things that we've passed off as others, and we try to, we have our own reputation too as a country. There's a reason we have one of the greatest military budgets ever for consecutive years. We do things, and some of them are not so friendly and not so up and up, and some of them don't have the great, the friendliest of motives behind it. So it's a little concerning when you're like, okay, where did this come from? Because there are people, like I got phone calls from people who are like not at all into conspiracy, they believe everything they hear on the TV, and they're like, what do you really think that thing is about? And I'm like, well, what did you hear on the TV? And they're like, yeah, but what do you think it's about? And like, red flags are starting to go off in a lot of people's minds, which I guess is a good thing, but at the same time, is that like a deliberate thing too? Like, are we trying to make people more conspiracy minded or more doubtful? Like, there's just so many different angles I have in my head. At one point, I was like, maybe it's aliens. Maybe they're spraying some zombie spray. Like, I don't know. Like, I have no idea. It could be a billion things that go up there. It's all out there.
I hear you. Got to run multiple storylines at one time. You got to always be willing to ask those questions. And if they're telling a story, there's probably something that's a little bit off.
Oh, for sure. That's why I'm like, there's more to it. There's always more behind it. And like you said before, they, try to keep people from going hysterical. But I kind of think in a way, this is causing a lot of people to become hysterical, especially after the last 3 years. Like, people are not the best in the best mental mind, like, the best mental mindsets right now.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. It's like really dominating the news headlines. And when those types of things happen, as you said, you always have to ask, well, what else is going on? Or what is the purpose of this thing here? Again,
Yeah.
I do think it is really something to be concerned about. I
It is.
do think that we should be talking about it, but also, we need to be thinking about other things as well. I'm trying to get us onto our next story. The article I had, I reached the limit of articles. I'm going to try to open it in a private tab.
Is it the California medical?
Yeah. Yeah, I got it. I opened it in a private tab, which you can often
I like this one too.
do. So, yeah, out in California, there is a law. It was actually put into place, and then thanks to a lawsuit, it has been put on a temporary halt while the
Mhm.
case is litigated. But this law told doctors that they have to basically repeat the state endorsed line on COVID-19. So, and if you go outside of those lines, you could lose your medical license.
Mhm. Yeah. There's
So, yeah,
These
go ahead.
doctors are brave. These doctors that are fighting this are absolutely brave. I give them a lot of credit. There's been a lot of things that were deemed misinformation in the last several years, and it's come to be truth. And actually, a lot of the misinformation 12 doctors, their information is actually pretty credible with everything that has come down the pike since then. So I do think bills like this are incredibly dangerous. I want to give credit to that federal judge who is like no, we're not going to be implementing this legislation at this time. I think that was incredibly brave of him, considering all the pressure that goes behind this and all the money. And at this point too, I think big pharma is a branch of government, so
Well,
there's a lot.
they're the biggest lobby. They're bigger than the big oil lobby. So
Mhm.
they definitely have a lot of influence.
They
So at the
do.
end of last month, which was January 2023, a federal judge in California granted a preliminary injunction in a pair of related lawsuits filed in opposition to the state's new medical misinformation law. And
Mhm.
as I said, it went into effect January 1st and it was blocked on January 28th. So it was in place a little less than a month. And so this temporarily blocks the enforcement of the law for individual physicians um, who are plaintiffs in the suits, as well as physicians who are members of represented by the organization. So that's interesting. I didn't realize that it only blocks it for people who are named in the suits or represented by like the
Ooh.
organization, because one of them is like a consortium of doctors.
Ooh.
I thought it was for all the doctors, but it's only for the ones named in the case. That's interesting.
That's so interesting because you would think it would be like an impact kind of lawsuit where it would then have to
Yeah.
deal with everyone else. I hope
Well,
that.
I think that that was the same in our lawsuit, though. There was something that happened that impacted only the people who were named on the case. But once the case is fully litigated,
Mhm.
then the final decision impacts everyone or something like that. It
Yeah.
seems a little bit silly. You would think that if it's enough for the people in named, they would do it for everybody. But
Mhm.
nonetheless, as you were saying, these doctors are brave. This is important. Um, and of course, it's just the beginning of this fight. So let's just read a piece of the bill. So AB 2098 specifies that dissemination applies to information shared by the physician to a patient under their care in the form of treatment or advice. And it defines misinformation as false information that is contradicted by contemporary scientific consensus contrary to the standard of care. So if you're just talking to your patient and you tell them that they might consider any option that is not within the scientific consensus, you could lose your license.
It's scary. This type of legislation is scary, and it could lead to. It's huge. Whatever happens here is going to have some impact on what happens in the future with a lot of other things. There was this doctor. He was delivering babies back in the day, and he believed a lot of women were getting infections and dying because they weren't washing their hands before going into surgery. This was like a super long time ago. And
Mhm.
he lost his medical license for this. Now, what do we know in present day? That you really should wash your hands and you should do so thoroughly. And you should probably put on some gloves before delivering a baby or anything like that. So this doctor took the risk of being independent and critically minded and went and did his own thing, and he got punished for it. And I think this is just another example of what they're going to be trying to do. They're going to be punishing doctors for being critical thinkers, for looking out for their patients, and for upholding their oath to do no harm.
Right. There
Every
is
patient has
no
the right
one
for consent.
size. There is no one size fits all for
Right.
anything. Sure, is there a general way that you do things?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but there's always going to be an exception to that, and it's dangerous
It is.
to really clamp down on doctors like this. And I think the thing that they don't realize what's going to happen is doctors are just going to leave California. They're going to go somewhere where it's safer for them to practice. And the people who are left in California are going to have access to far less um, healthcare options,
Hmm.
a lower
It's
standard of care.
I think laws like this are just as scary on like the other end, if you want to like go on the other end a little bit, where like there's the states that if you want to end a pregnancy, that if you do so out of state, you could have legal action upon your return, or the doctor could be penalized. I think we're just overreaching, and we just have to trust that doctor. Now, granted, that's a whole separate issue, but I think the fact that these laws are just so punitive and they're based off like some serious dictatorship type techniques, it's scary what could happen here. And I'm happy that there's this injunction, and hopefully they totally win the case, and then it impacts everybody else, because at this time it's not law. I believe it's just legislation.
No, it went into effect
Oh,
January
it did?
1st. Yeah,
Oh,
so this is one of those pieces of legislation. Now, there's a lot of other bad bills that were
yeah.
introduced in 2023 onto the
Mhm.
floor in states across the country. I know, for example, in Connecticut, we had one for the age of consent being pushed to age 12. I know in New York, there was one for no consent, no age, like any kid of any age could
Mhm.
consent to any medical thing outside of their parents' permission.
Ugh.
That's crazy.
That is absolutely crazy. I
Yeah,
mean, think
and New
about
York
being
got a bunch
12.
of them.
Think about being 12, or think about being 20 and the things you did then compared to things you would do now.
Think
You're
about
like,
being 8. In New York, you could be 8 and be like, "Yeah, let me get that vax so I can get a slice of pizza."
yeah, maybe I don't know that I have an allergy to this vax, like, and I'm just going to do it because I want to go hang out, or I want to join a sport, not necessarily join a sports team because I think they pulled that one. But, there were some crazy rules for them, and it's dangerous. I think you don't have your brain's not fully developed to your like mid 20s pretty much. So to give children these kinds of powers to do things for them, they don't really know everything yet. So I do think it's always a parent's decision. I'm very pro parent.
Yeah, I'd like to see what the other side is arguing. I did see an article being like, "Oh, this isn't censorship." So I'm gonna pull that one up real quick.
What's
So
their definition of censorship? It's crazy. I mean,
I
again,
think
I
they're
think
saying this is just like professional.
it should be between the parent and the doctor.
Okay,
Like
here we go.
everything should be with a parent and a doctor, and really ultimately the parent. So
So it says AB 2098 is not censorship. One of the oldest tropes favored by quacks of all stripes, including anti vaxxers, is to portray any attempt at regulating their quackery as an assault on freedom of speech. It is therefore not surprising that after its passage by the California legislature, prominent spreaders of COVID-19 misinformation are labeling AB 2098, which seeks to clarify and codify the power of Medical Board of California to discipline physicians for spreading COVID-19 misinformation, as creating thought crimes. So is your narrative so weak that you must threaten doctors who speak the truth? And he's saying that this person is obviously a quack, and that's a ridiculous statement. Thanks to a grant deadline, I have what one might call a paucity of material for earlier this week. Fortunately, however, I can update something I wrote about AB 2098 with a common theme bubbling up among anti vaxxers and COVID 19 contrarians who deny they are anti vax but parrot anti vax misinformation that increasingly sounds like pre pandemic old school anti vax propaganda. This
with
theme
the
has been
blanket labels.
right. So this person is just basically saying that this bill would allow regulators to discipline doctors for spreading COVID-19. You know, the people who are against this, they're spreaders, they've been, but it's just honestly, I think at this point, if you're saying that the people who are challenging this, Tracy Beth Hogue, Aaron Cariotti, I think they've objectively been proven right on almost everything that they thought. And the other
Agreed.
side has been proven wrong. And not even proven wrong. They're out here being like, yeah, we're wrong. Like school shutdowns, that was
Mm,
a horrible idea. Like,
that was that was a
you know,
bad idea. We'll get to that though.
Exactly. It's just, I don't know. It's a little bit.
It's bad. It's all bad stuff. Like it's just not
Yeah.
good to be doing this. Like if you're, and I think we need to give doctors more credit. Like they've seen like things happen with their patients. Like I know a doctor personally who had a terrible reaction to the point where he had to go to the hospital after. Because, and I'm not going to go into his story, but he had to go to the hospital. And I think his opinion when he speaks to his patients should stand for something. And I don't think someone writing an article about their opinion because of things that they've read that has now been deemed false because, you have those three-letter agencies coming out and saying, oh, we were wrong, and then you have the people who are huge proponents of it saying like, yeah, it doesn't offer that broad protection. Like, would that be then deemed misinformation if the doctor is saying it in California because it's not sticking to the script? It's dangerous.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, like so for example, later on in this article, this person goes on to say to basically list like, oh, these are the people who are involved. He calls out Aaron Cariotti, and he's like basically like this is a crazy claim. Where is this biofascist state headed? He's like, really? And then he says elsewhere, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, Stanford academic, senior scholar at Brownstone Institute, and one of three writers of the Great Barrington Declaration, the don't worry, be happy eugenicists call to let COVID-19 rip. So he's basically saying that it was eugenicists, like survival of the fittest, to just basically do focus protection, let most people go live their lives and really trying to look out for the old and the sick,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
which I think objectively has kind of been proven to have been like what we should have done.
I agree. That's what they did in Sweden. I was following Sweden the whole time. I followed several countries throughout the last 3 years and their responses and seeing how they all fared because they were different approaches. And I think Sweden had a very intelligent approach. It didn't show to be doing anything more harmful than what had happened elsewhere around the world. And if anything, I think they might have even fared a little bit better than the rest of us did. And I don't understand the whole anti-vaxxer label because there's a lot of people, including myself, who will say, like, if you're in a certain group, right, and you're in an older group, a population of people, and and your doctor advises you to get it, then get it. Like, if that's comfortable with you, and it should be ultimately your choice because it is your body, like, then that's what you go and do. I think the whole anti-vaxxer label is ridiculous because it just makes it seem like, oh no, nobody should get it. That's the thing. Like, nobody should be speaking for anyone else but themselves. So end it there with that whole article. Like, shame on that person for the labeling and the generalizations.
Right, exactly. And just total dismissal of the ideas. I mean, I do at least appreciate when I actually don't even see at any point where they try to make any legitimate arguments that are based on ideas. They basically just use these heavy-handed labels. Oh, the eugenicist call, this is this quack. And then afterwards, he or she, whoever's making this post, kind of just like puts up a bunch of tweets and they're just like censorship. I don't think you know what that means, but doesn't actually say what they think it means, right? Also, just putting up this tweet being like, oh, this person who supports the bill was also a January 6th person, like, oh, they're all crazy January 6th people, just kind of cherry picking things. Oh, it's a liberty grab, but doesn't actually do anything to
I mean, what have
like,
we learned? We learned how many definitions have been changed since 2019. Definitions have been changed time and time again, and down to immunity. So I guess throwing censorship in there with a different definition, sure. I mean, it's par for course at this point in time. But for those who know real definitions, that is exactly you're stifling a doctor's ability to speak in their professional opinion based off their experiences and their education. And that is detrimental to the patient doctor relationship and health overall.
right. And just like long term, if those agencies want to have any credibility, they're continuing to sort of undermine that. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it would be nice to have an independent body. The goals of those agencies, I think, are ones that we ought to have. I
Yeah.
think the question is what is the best way to maintain independent agencies? Is it through the government, or is it through some other sort of system? Or maybe there is a private system and the government has the system, but they don't have regulatory power or something like that.
Mhm.
The problem is that a lot of these agencies have the ability to create regulation that holds the same weight as law.
That's a huge problem.
And
Right.
that's a problem. Like, we don't vote for them. We
Exactly.
can't, they
Exactly.
have
So good.
no oversight. Our legislatures made a law being like, the CDC can make regulation on this thing, and it basically holds the same weight as law, but that legislator has long gone from his job.
Right.
And the CDC is still out here making regulations, and there's nobody to hold accountable for that. And I want to get into this next article that shows unequivocally that the problem with following the accepted consensus of scientific thought, as
Mhm.
AB 208 2098
Mhm.
calls for, the experts are wrong. They've
Yeah.
been wrong over and 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 over again. And so
Science changes. Thank God.
this is from a Substack that I really like. The
Mhm.
person's name is Eugipius, or I'm not saying that correctly. Sorry. I think it's like one of those
Cool.
pseudonyms from like Greek or Latin. And he came up during the pandemic, this writer. I think now he does his Substack full time, and it's from Germany. This person, they're from Germany, so it gives us a little perspective. I actually think Germany was pretty bad over in Europe. I know a lot of us open schoolers and anti-maskers here in the US always like to point over to Europe as an example of how they did things at least a little bit better. It
Mhm.
varied from place to place, but I think that Germany was actually pretty bad. Do you know anything about Germany?
I believe they were super strict. They have some serious mandate rules, and they were not scared to use them. And that was just from my understanding of it. And it was a little bit concerning because, people like you and I who have, sincerely held religious beliefs, like that could be a huge problem. But I'm not sure if they allowed, because I know in like other countries, natural immunity qualified as, you were allowed to like go
Yeah.
into
See,
business.
I
So I'm not
still
sure if
didn't
Germany did
like
that.
that. I still didn't like it on principle because I'm like, that's just
Still discrimination.
right, it's still discrimination. Like, I guess if we're like, gonna do things on somewhat of a scientific basis, sure. But I
Hmm.
still was never for that as holding that up as a policy. Cause I'm
Right.
like, now I have to like go get tested and like still
No,
prove that I had, like, that's silly. The whole thing is silly.
I think
Um,
if I think if you have natural immunity and you're like, whatever, it shouldn't. It should just make everyone else less of the threat, so it shouldn't really matter, and everyone should be able
right.
to walk about their business as they choose.
It should just be an accepted thing that that's how it is. So like, get on with your life. Uh, but yeah, I do think that they did have natural immunity as part of their vaccine passport. But I was talking to somebody in before the holidays, and they were traveling in Europe, and they were going through Germany, and she was like, nah, I had to leave because they still have mask mandates in some places and this and that, and it just like wasn't comfortable. Like, why am I gonna spend my time and money
I
in this
agree.
place? I'll go to somewhere where I don't have to wear a mask on public transport and in a
Hmm.
lot of the buildings. But let's go ahead and just check out this article all about our experts and how so very wrong they have been. So Lauterbach in 2020, which I believe that this is a one of these institutions or scientists over in Germany who had a lot of power. And in 2020, they said schools drive the pandemic. The research is clear. And
Was
now
it though?
in 2023, what is Lauterbach saying? The belief that many infections occur in schools and daycare centers did not prove to be correct. Oh, you don't say.
Yeah, it's messed up though, because kids got the blame for it, and I think there's going to be a lot of emotional damage to our children, not just because they miss school and they are struggling to read and write in the fourth and fifth and sixth grade at this point, but just because we put a lot of the emotional burden on them, like stay away from grandma, don't go hug your aunt, don't go hug anyone, don't touch anyone, and then they tried gaslighting parents and scaring parents into oh, they're getting Kawasaki disease.
Yes,
And
remember
I was
that?
like, and I like remember looking it up. I'm like, well, you could get it from carpet cleaner, and it's like very rare, like all these things. And I'm
Yeah,
like, it's
and it's just
not
like
real
a post-viral infection type thing. So if you have a virus, okay, it would make sense that this would be a potential
yeah, it's like what happened to it,
cause,
right? So
but
they were
it
scaring
also
everyone, and
it
it
right,
bought
and
them
it
more
never
time.
panned out. It never panned out. Thankfully, that one happened a little bit more quickly. Like we kind
Yes,
of figured that one out a little bit more quickly.
thank
This
God.
is, and I mean, some of us have kind of been on the whole like closing schools. This is such a great idea for a while.
Yeah,
This took them 3 years, so he gives more of an example displaying exactly what he's talking about here. So this professor Karl Lauterbach, he is saying something here in German that I'm not sure, but here the article that he's sharing explains that children may transmit coronavirus at the same rate as adults, and this was in November 2020. This is almost exactly the date. It was a couple days before this that New York City public schools shut down again.
yes,
We
I
had that
remember that.
percent rate. And so whatever schools were open in that hybrid capacity were forced to shut down, and middle schools and high schools would not reopen again
Hmm.
until sometime in March, I believe.
They were
So
they were closed for a while.
right. And so these this stuff was so damaging. Our schools were open
Hmm.
and they were safe.
They were.
COVID, of course, there was cases, but it wasn't super rampant. People had to go home. They went home and came back. My
Hmm.
school didn't have any cases, and yet stuff like this was coming out, and that's why our schools had to close down. I mean, there was some horrible deal that we made with the unions too, but
I think that's why they threw in the other viruses for the kids and try to make it seem worse for them so that they could get that support for closing the schools without the backlash that and that was totally like union driven. Like they really didn't want to open those schools around the country. I
right,
think like Chicago and other places were just like they weren't back for a long time. And they just didn't want it to work, in my opinion. They really just didn't
I
want to
yeah, I
being
do
comfortable with
agree.
their pajamas teaching whatever they were. And it's sad because kids, you see it now. I'm in the schools, you see the impact that it had, and it's hard. It's extensive.
Yeah, I think it was really easy to be scared when you were comfortable at home in your pajamas, right?
Yeah.
It's real easy to stay scared and not get unscared.
Yep.
But this is the conclusion in this article, and I really like what he says here and how he puts it, because this is more than they aren't quite admitting they're wrong here, right? This
Right.
isn't like the CDC or the FDA coming out and being like, "Oh, we were wrong." What they're doing here is this is an open attempt to shift blame for the catastrophic pandemic measures onto the not so nebulous, right? It's just he's a scientist who
You
advised the
know,
government.
whoops.
Not a bad guy, but also not the government. Not wasn't us. It was just the scientist.
Yeah.
And of course, there's a very tired lie that nobody knew any better in 2020. I can't stand this. Well, we were doing the best we could with the information we had at the time. It's like, no, we knew. I
Yeah.
knew.
We knew it was there. And even if you want to say, okay, like in April, say we would like they let us go back in May, oh, we made a mistake, or like there were so much numbers and so many statistics that had come out in that time period that we could have gone back a lot sooner. Even if they did need 30 days to figure it out, fine. I don't think 30 days, as bad as that would have been, is not
Right.
what turned out
It
to
would
be.
have been forgivable. You know what I
Yes,
mean? If
yes,
we
agreed.
had been like, all right, we were wrong. Like, let's get our stuff together and get back.
Yeah,
But we had these people like Lauterbach and other COVID zealots like Zoe Hyde, and they were publishing these weekly contact tracing data and
hmm,
all these telling us that there's this plurality of infections to
yeah,
care homes. And yet we couldn't find any in these educational centers, and they were going crazy about it, even though it was not there. Just they were just ignoring what was happening in the schools and claiming doom.
Yeah,
What's most important, though, is the emerging strategy that we see here and in other places to contain the growing impression that our entire pandemic response has been a failure.
agreed to that.
Too many people have been complicit in these ruinous policies for there ever to be an open acknowledgement that they constitute wholesale disaster. Instead, they'll try to pick aspects of the containment regime to repudiate instead, and in the hopes that limited missions will claim their critics and forestall an avalanche. In Germany, they've decided that it's the school closures that are to be officially regretted, right? So they're not going to be like it was all bad. They're just going to admit to like pieces here and there and try as much as they can to like be like, oh, it was the scientists. I
Yeah.
suspect this is a preview of the strategy they'll pursue with the mass vaccination campaign. Around this time next year, they'll too start to admit in their zeal to save lives, they might have accidentally over vaccinated some younger cohorts. They didn't know any better at the time, they'll say. They were just acting in good faith, they'll add.
They knew
Never.
better. They knew
Oh,
better because we saw a bunch of stuff that had come out by, groups, specifically the Misinformation 12 or dozen, however you want to say it. And that information was there.
the Dirty Dozen. Is that what you're
Yeah.
talking about?
Yeah.
They were like,
They
well,
knew all this. They were sharing all this. And there we were still putting this stuff out there.
so
And
funny. My dad has got the Mercola blog for years now, and Mercola was one of those Dirty Dozen 12.
here she
And
was.
my dad is like the most middle of the road kind of guy you'll ever come across. Like
Mhm.
any talk of conspiracy theories, he's out. But at the same time, he is willing to read Mercola's blog and like consider some of the stuff on the low. So he's
Yeah.
like he's funny like that.
Yeah, there's a few doctors on, like of the 12, and they had done webinars and they were trying to get the information out there. And the kids didn't need to be locked up because again, there's some serious and extensive damage that was done to our children academically, cognitively, mentally, and emotionally. And I really don't, I do believe that there's hope and that damage can be, it can be fixed. I don't like to be a hopeless person, so I think things can change and get better. But we
Yeah.
also have to recognize the wrongs and go forward and make changes and agree never to do these things again.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest issues with the schools is that on top of what's happened to our kids is there's this very interesting and concerted effort to drive teachers from the classroom. Now, there are legitimate reasons teachers are leaving for sure. I mean, we were kicked out,
Oops.
but there's, teachers they're leaving cuz there's a lot of fighting going on. They don't have enough power control over their curriculum that they're forced to be taught. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and but I also think there's been this like concerted like social media. I felt it for years, the self-care and the teachers as victims kind of mentality. And kids don't have there's just not enough teachers in the classrooms, and a lot of the good teachers are leaving. So on top of all these kids coming in with so many more problems and academic needs, emotional needs, special education needs, we're also losing some of our best and our brightest. And because of such stringent certification requirements, it's not like some person who works in finance can just come over and teach math, right? They
Yeah.
have to spend a year and a half or 2 years, depending on the path that they take, to get those qualifications and their state certifications so that they can
Mm-hmm.
teach.
Yeah. It's tough. I've been hearing. I actually,
They'd be taking a huge pay cut. So, like, who's doing that?
yeah, especially in today's day and age. I mean, eggs are like $1 billion. You can't take a pay cut, And I
Just buy me some chickens.
yeah, get some hens. Do it. Get it done. We know people. We can get it.
Yeah, I don't really. The condo association rules are not really cool with that.
Oh, is it in the bylaws? I don't know. I should
I'm
check.
sure it is. There's no way we can have chickens. They took away our grills, man. All,
Uh,
all the propaganda on the open. No, I'm just kidding. I think it was like an insurance thing. But
Probably.
I think it's interesting though, the alignment of they said that the insurance rates rose substantially
Mhm.
for have being allowed to have like open flame barbecues basically in fire pits.
Yeah.
now, like out of all these years, and then also at the same time that there's all this propaganda in the news about like not using gas stoves and this and that. I sent a
Yeah.
message. I was like, you realize that if our electricity goes out, we essentially have no way to cook food. I was
Yeah.
like, don't give
It
in
goes
to the
back to the
propaganda.
EMP.
We
Goes
should.
back to the balloon.
It's like, anyways, how was house hunting? I know you did some house hunting today, Bart,
Yeah, did a
and you
little house hunting. A little disappointed, actually. Like the fact that some of these homes are priced out of like reason, but like fine, you still go see it, and then it's like all this work that needs to be done. It's like nah. And then my other issue is, and whatever, is like all these electrical grids and these electrical stations. They're around these homes, and it's like, doesn't anybody know how dangerous that is? Like that's a legitimate thing. Like that, that's normie science
Mm.
where it's potentially dangerous. So it didn't go as well
I
as we would
mean
like.
that the area is a little bit tough where we are, especially where there's so much resources and buildings and businesses. There's a lot
Mhm.
of commerce going on. So I feel like you have to go a little bit more off the coast. You have to go inland
Yeah,
to get
I
off
guess
the
so.
coast, away from where all the masses live. You
Yeah,
got to be like 20 minutes from a grocery store if you want to be free of those kinds of things, which in some ways is nice. I'm more and more warming up to the idea, but also like 20 minutes to get to civilization is like a lot, it adds a lot to your life.
it's quite
But
the
maybe
adjustment.
one day. I think for now we like the condo life next to the 95.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's funny that people from Connecticut call it the 95.
The 95. I usually don't call it the 95. I was just kind of being silly.
Oh, okay, cool. Because
Yeah, yeah.
I
It's
thought that was interesting. I'm like, why is
the
it the 95?
the is like a Cali thing. They'd be like the 29. Usually we just say 95, but I was just like accentuating, like,
Yeah.
you
No,
know.
I've heard it before, and I'm like, why the? Where does the come from? Like, it's 95.
No, no. The 95.
I mean, I get like hopping on the BQE or the Belt or the
Mhm.
Van Wyck,
Mhm,
but
mhm.
like, I don't know. I guess it's a different kind of flow of the sound.
No, just being silly. All right, listen, before we get out of here though, I mean, you do have it in your name, so hopefully people kind of like
Oh,
call
word.
on like Regina. You could go check her out. If you
Yeah.
search your health, your wellness, you'll see that on
Mhm.
Instagram. Are you on any other platforms as well?
My website is currently being developed and it's looking really good so far, so I'm excited about that.
Okay.
Right now, just doing a lot more on Instagram and just getting out there on like the local, like the community apps and things like that. Things have been pretty exciting. I guess people are interested in the integrative nutrition, coaching and that approach. There's a lot of since I guess the last 3 years, people are certainly trying to make more of an effort towards their health, and they need a little bit more guidance because there's just so much information from all these different places.
Mhm.
So I'm just fortunate enough to help guide people on their way.
Yeah, and I think that that's an important thing to talk about too, especially how we were just talking about the experts and what they may or may not know and how we can know, because I don't think that we can know everything. I don't think that one person can know everything. I think that we can all ask questions. I think that we can all be dangerous enough, like know enough that we can make informed decisions. But of course you also have to have the experts who you do trust, who really do that detailed sorting through information. Like I have
Mhm.
you. I love always tapping into you because you have that very specific knowledge in your industry. I love having Elizabeth because she's always keeping me up to date on the latest stuff with farming and all of her like herbal type of things. So
Mhm.
I know that I can kind of count on you guys to filter that information for me. You guys are trusted sources, and I think that's such an important part of creating a free life is you have to find your own trusted sources to filter that information for you, but you also have to be dangerous enough to be like, you know what? This person, I did trust them, but there's a little
Right,
something
exactly. There's a lot of
going on
people that I've like once trusted, and I'm like, well, that doesn't really apply anymore, and they're
here.
still pushing.
Right.
You have to do that. You
You
have to
have
do
to
that.
constantly be updating, but you do have to find your shortcuts. You have to find your own filters and
Yep,
don't rely on the Google News filter. Don't rely on the Twitter
exactly.
algorithm filter. You have to create your own algorithms. One of the best ways I actually like to do this is I have a lot of chat groups. So on WhatsApp or on Signal, these chat groups that might be 5 people, 20 people, 50 people for various things, mom groups or just a group of, I don't know, teachers and other people, fired workers. And I find they put in articles, and I find them to be very effective filters for
Mhm.
fine-tune reading, and I don't get caught in that black hole of like the Twitter scroll or like the Instagram reels where you're just going and going, or even trying to find what's going on in the news and being impacted by the algorithm. So I think that's a really easy tool for people, is find these chat groups, start the chat groups, and that's a really cool way to share and get information in a very timely manner. But also it's like highly filtered, and you don't have to worry about the nonsense.
Yeah, you can't focus on one thing, like one area. You'll drive yourself crazy. And then what are you really learning in the grand scheme of it? Because
Right.
everything is ultimately connected. So you can't stick to one thing. You really have to get yourself
Yeah.
out there.
And I think getting outside of that news stream, because that's like a cycle, like they're really messing with your energy
For
and
sure.
your vibrations, and they want you to kind of be caught up in their cycle. So I like doing this show because it's like my one time of the week where I do kind of see, okay, like what are the big headlines, like I'm gonna play the YouTube click game here, I'm gonna go for the big headline, but really try to take that alternative take. But outside of kind of this time, I really do try to be outside of that news machine, trying to think about the bigger ideas, the longer term ideas, the building of our community ideas. So guys, listen, make sure that first of all, you like this video, you subscribe to the channel. I should have said that at the very beginning. I have to get better at that. But also make sure you go check out Regina at Your Health, Your Wellness. She's on Instagram right now. Very soon, she's going to have her website up and running, and she's going to have great advice for you, really good coaching. I kind of, get a little free tips here and there, but also like a good resource to really make sure you're getting high quality vitamins and supplements. She can hook you up with all of that. So go check her out. Check me out. Stay beautiful with that face and keep living free.
Thank you so much, girl. It was great working with you tonight.
As always.